This is at Trustworthy SLAV.
This is at Incognito, COH.
CRK, Black Dot Compilled.
This is the Fed Post.
Logically, I think that's bullshit. I don't want to think about it.
I don't think any of our audience wants to hear this. Like, no one wants to hear this.
Well,
like,
see, it's because fucking White Pill, COH, confirmed free will believer. Let's fucking go, dude. We're back, boys.
yeah.
Let's fucking go, dude.
If you told me there was no free will, I'd be like, what the fuck? I'd be shocked if COH said that. I'd be like, what? Like,
COH is probably the least likely out of the three of us to believe that.
Oh, yeah. That would trip me out. But
Yeah.
all right, but forget about the philosophy. Forget about the struggle session of whatever that is.
But yeah, okay. So we were talking about states' rights. That's the next thing that we're getting into before I backpedaled to have a meaningless discussion about philosophy.
It's not meaningless. Well, yeah,
well, I want to say a quick side note, which is something that irks me a little bit, which is, you mentioned earlier that, the people that think that it's, killing a baby, murder, yada, 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 that's a position from a religious point of view. And again, like, I just don't believe that. You know what I mean? Even at times when in my life, when I've been not at all religious, like it just doesn't, the case of the clump of cells versus, versus this is life. Like it really favors the latter over the former in my mind. And I think that people feel that. And I think that the arriving at the idea that is killing a person really doesn't need any kind of, you don't need religious, the presence of like an absolute truth or of God in your thought process at all, really. And I think that it's a bit of a trope that people throw out there that irks me a little bit because again, to my mind, and I've been secular most of my life, really, to my mind, it's the obvious thing has always been that you're killing something that's alive. And God has never played any role in that arithmetic.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah. I've never heard this perspective. So that's interesting.
I'll offer a little bit different perspective as well. That I guess it's situational perspective that's different, but the overall is the same, which is that I worked at a women's fertility clinic for a significant period of time, or I don't know, about a year or so.
A broads fertility clinic.
Yeah, fertility clinic for broads. And essentially what we would do is, we were helping women through fertility treatments, be it, taking medications to help with ovulation or like charting their ovulation or, doing IUI or all this different shit, like to help people have kids. But also what we did was a lot of like counseling and a lot of, just helping people cope with miscarriages. And there were a lot of women who were not religious, because I knew them decently well, who had multiple miscarriages in their route of trying to have a child. And those miscarriages took a very, very, very heavy toll on them. And I don't think that was all just because of what could have been. A lot of them, there was a spiritual aspect to it outside of a religious quandary. So yeah, I think that I think there's innately something, I think it's disingenuous to say it's a clump of cells. I think it's obviously alive or going to be alive. I'm fine though if people disagree. We can disagree on it, and ultimately, I'm not going to say that because I have that conviction, I think that we should outlaw abortion or anything like that. Like I said, I think ultimately, if you're going to outlaw abortion, there's an order of operations that should be done first to ensure that people have, access to maternity leave. People have access to health care. That there is a more robust and financed adoptive care system, that we have less economic crisis going on. You put loopholes, safety nets into place. Not loopholes, sorry. You put safety nets and that type of thing into place that can help to deter away from the circumstances where one would feel pushed into having an abortion, etc. So for me, like, I'm not going to be like, bro, I'm staunchly pro-life. Fuck that shit. Women should go to jail if they kill a baby because that's murder or whatever. No, I think that's absurd. But I do think that I think that it's a significant thing to abort a life. And I think that it is something that neither side really treats with the proper sanctity. And also to bring a life into this world is something that is itself sacred. So taking care of that, making sure we have the right structures and communities in place in order to make sure that the kid isn't born into a life of destitution, etc. Sure. I think these are things that are more important than outlawing the abortion in the first place, because I think that, they lead to further societal ills. And as a collectivist, I just don't generally think that that's good.
Sure. I mean, for anybody that's ever had a conversation with people that have like had even like early miscarriages and everything, I mean, without going into detail or whatever, like, you pop that little sucker out the other end, right? And like it's a little shrimp person, dude. It's got little fucking hands and all of that shit. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, okay, like if I was someone of the same position as like CRK or something, then obviously it's just because there's something that's visually approximating a person doesn't necessarily mean that it is. But I mean, maybe shocking people emotionally doesn't have a high level of value necessarily. But I mean, I don't know. I kind of just argued against myself there, but I mean, it's something, and I have to believe it's something. And I will say as a side note that I do think that while I'm not one of them, I am envious and actually really respect the moral clarity and just like dogged devotion of people that are literally just like, no, this is a person. You're murdering that person. This is legalized murder. This is evil and horrible. Like, because like it makes sense, mm-hmm. Like maybe I've just been too steeped in like moral relativism my whole life and I'm going to go to hell or I'm injecting nuance where it shouldn't be. But like, I respect that level of clarity and like simplicity of mind there. Simplicity of mind's like a really insulting way of putting it, to be honest. But I just don't know that that's how I can think.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen people that have had abortions and, I mean, I know that there's this portrayal I see on the right of like, like just like
I know you're
party girls just going to have abortions. Oh, I'm for my 8th abortion. I'm drunk off wine. And it just seems like something cartoonish that I don't know. I've never seen that anywhere. I mean, I've never seen that. Most people I know who've had abortions were completely miserable and completely like hated the whole thing and were depressed about it. So in my mind, it was always something that happened that, they'd rather not have happened. It's hard for me to imagine it as just like, oh, it's fun or like or something totally. Like, I mean, when you guys talk about the miscarriage, it reminds me of that because like I don't know anyone who's had a miscarriage, but I do know people who've gotten them and like they usually are pretty upset. And yeah, I mean, again, like condoms aren't foolproof, birth control isn't foolproof. I mean, things happen.
I need to ask, I feel like this is like an important question, which is like, do you feel like that experience when people have that, right? Mm-hmm. What you just said, you have an abortion, they're upset about it and all of that. Like, do you think that there's any kind of like transcendent truth that's being revealed in that at all?
Well, I think the trimester matter. I mean, I think the phase of how long it's been developed matters. I do. Again, I don't think taking Plan B is... Wait, just to be clear, you guys think... Not to argue about this, but you guys think that Plan B is murder? Yes, yes or,
I think
or no?
That is kind of a... it's one of those instances of like using language that is inflammatory. I don't necessarily think it's murder. I do think it's extinguishing a life, though, yes.
I'll just sack up and just say yes. Even though, like I said earlier, like I feel the same thing of like, yes, it doesn't feel as severe, but it's mostly like a pretty superficial distinction. And so logically, like if I'm saying abortion is murder, then I have to say that Plan B is also, but I don't feel it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. As
To
far
me,
as like
it's like-
transcendental of like having an abortion, the feeling, yeah. I mean, if you're, yeah, I mean, I don't think, again, you have to go under surgery and they cut you open and take something out of you. I mean, there's no situation where that would be good.
It's just a traumatizing experience in that way, you're saying.
I mean, it has to be. I mean, it's like, you know, but again, that's not a reason why it should never be done. I mean, sometimes we all have to do things that we'd rather not do for a greater good or whatever. So, I mean, you know, I don't think anyone wants to get surgery for anything, but, you know, you sort of have to.
I think
whoa. we forgot about one of our other favorite cultural topics here, which is the trans
wow, I wasn't
question.
even thinking that. That's amazing.
Dude, I didn't even. Well, I think about.
Yeah, you got to.
I like, maybe this is like an offensive comparison, but I guess like, yeah, I mean, with sort of what you're saying, like, you know, I do like a lot of fishing, right? And you know, you land a fish and it's flopping around and gasping, and it's really ugly, right? It's like a really unpleasant, ugly scene. But that, I mean, you know, I don't think that has any bearing on whether or not what I'm doing is morally right.
Right.
I just, and so maybe I am contradicting myself a little bit, but I have to imagine, at least, you know, I make a really firm distinction between humans and like lower forms of life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think just straight up, like, I eat cows and don't feel remorse about it because cows don't have as much value as we do, because they don't have that spark of intelligence.
This is a natural order.
Yeah. And I don't see any issue with that. And so when we're talking about like a woman who has like a really horrible traumatic experience with an abortion, I mean, I guess we can chalk it up to, just being like, I mean, it's horrible on its face, just the mechanics of it. Right. But like, I do feel like there is, like I said, like a transcendent, it's like a glimpse of, if you want to call it God, or just of like a truth, a real universal truth. When I go to the Grand Canyon and I'm like moved by the natural beauty of it, I think that is like this brief little moment of like seeing truth, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And when, because I've known girls that like had abortions, right? And uniformly, it's the same exact thing that you said, right? Like I have never actually met anybody that's like these fucking psycho Handmaid's Tale girl boss abortion celebrators. I don't know that I ever will.
Never seen that before.
Most of those women have not had abortions.
I believe that. Honestly, just like how a lot of people I know, that like a lot of people that make jokes about like, I have a drinking problem. Whoa. Like haven't actually had a drinking problem like me, where you actually like lose things in your life because of it. It's never actually tangibly affected them. I have to imagine when I encounter women like that have that response, that it's a similar thing to that Grand Canyon that I'm saying. Yes. It's just that like there is something there, you know what I mean? And like there's a mourning that's happening. And I think that I'm putting my fucking post-rationalist cap on right now. And I don't think that what I'm saying really stands up to like, you know, logical observation, because.
No, I think it does. I think because everything in our wiring is for procreation. Like literally every single thing in our wiring is for procreation. So to not do that, or to go against that, is to go against literally the fabric of your human being. We're here to have kids, like, just evolutionarily speaking.
Well, that's kind of a moral virtue there then anyways. And so it would be a moral failing in kind of a way.
And I mean, you know, I just feel like there's the framing, a lot of this is just strange to me, because I feel like there's a lot of people on the right that just view this as like a consequence of like party culture and hookup culture and all that. And I don't know, in my mind, you know, obviously there's some truth to that, of course. In my mind, and this is something that I don't see the right acknowledge, which is kind of perplexes me. But a lot of the time when people are worried about having kids, the number one thing I hear is like, how the fuck am I going to afford that? That's the number one thing I hear. I don't really hear this thing of like, oh, because I'll have a kid, like that's going to be lame or what. Like, yeah, there's that too. But like the biggest thing is like, I think the first instinct people have is like, fuck, I'm we got pregnant, like me and the girl or whatever. And the first reaction is like, fuck, we got to take care of it. How the fuck am I going to take care of it? I don't think the first thing people jump to is like, we got to kill it. I think they get that through a second. Again, this is kind of what you're talking about. The intrinsic instinctual nature of people is to be like, how do we keep it alive? That's the first thing I think, the gut reaction, maybe not even thinking about it. Maybe I'm taking liberty speaking for other people, but I think that's the gut reaction people have is like, how do we keep it alive? And then I don't think anybody's first response is abortion. I think, or first thought, I think that comes after we're like, oh, fuck, we can't take care of this kid. I think that's how most people think about it.
I think there are times when, well, I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with that, though. It's like when you find maybe you're in a relationship or you're not in a relationship or something where you come to find that you're pregnant or you've gotten someone pregnant, and it's a situation that's untenable. Like you're like, oh, this is. I think some people's minds jump first into, well, we can't have this kid, but that's, I feel like most of the time because, like you're saying, oh, we couldn't raise this kid together. How am I going to do it on my own, et cetera, which is what's going on there in the background.
Sure.
I think, a big, I'll just say this quickly, like, a big thing is the average, time where people are getting married and having kids is being pushed back. That's across the generation is being pushed back.
Yep.
Owning a home pushed back, almost a decade, people can attribute that to, oh, these kids are just like selfish and hedonistic, latent adolescence. I think there's some truth to all that. I think we've all talked about that, obviously. But I mean, one glaring thing is that it's literally more expensive to do all those things. That's like glaring. Like to me, that is the biggest thing. And, I've met a lot of people my age, and I've always been like, no, I'm not having kids. I'm not interested in that. And I've met a lot of dudes my age who are like, no, I want to be a dad. I'd say more than not, or the people I've met that have just been like, yeah, I want to be, even when we were younger, like college days. So I think like people want to, and I'll be like, yo, what's up with that? What's up with your girl, things like that. And the money things is the thing I always hear about.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is for me.
I mean, same here.
Yeah, exactly, man. And, I think, I want to withdraw from this like psycho internet, hall of mirrors that this funhouse mirror shit where people get weird ideas of how it really is. Like I'm talking about what I've seen in my real life.
For sure.
It is, the economic thing is there. And whenever I talk to right wingers about this, they don't really have an answer for me. Not really. I mean, they sort of just say like, oh, it's not that expensive. It doesn't really matter. And to me, what I imagine when I hear that is like a libertarian living who's like fairly rich. It's like, oh, what's the big deal? What do you mean you can't afford it? What's the big deal? Like,
what are you talking about, dude? I'll just live like John McAfee and have guns and hang out on boats, dude. The only
people with like very established support systems.
Well, I was just going to say
traditional communities.
Because the only person I thought that ever gave an adequate answer to it, because honestly, it was like, because I think he said it in a humble way, acknowledging that
Bennett. Yep.
Exactly.
I was thinking about him too.
Motherfucker's Mormon, and it's clear to like it's. I don't think he had any illusions about the fact that this isn't necessarily a universal prescription because not everyone's fucking Mormon, right? But for them, it really is not that big of a deal. It's just like, the church is going to throw you a baby shower. Boom, 10 grand off of the top right there, And
in Mormon culture, it's like you were talking about how it's like it's a natural physical imperative to reproduce. In Mormon culture, it's a spiritual imperative as well.
Totally.
So it's seen as fulfilling, duties beyond what we have here on earth. So, I mean, in that sense, it's people come together to support that in a larger, more meaningful way than people do that live in a secular community. But like what you're saying, CRK, I think that's really the crux of it, is that it's people are trying to put this off as, moral failings, or, you have these individual personality qualifiers that are making you, fail at life. Like, and people are just playing too many video games and are kids their whole lives, or they're incels or whatever it is. And they don't know how to, grow up and get a house and get a job and have a kid or whatever. But you forget that there's material reasons that drive a lot of those, qualities, I'd say, within people.
Yes.
I mean, you look at Japan, right? Japan was economically shattered, just like run train on in World War II. And then, they pick up this like shock and awe type of capitalism, which is like almost an early front runner for the neoliberal projects that were established in Latin America. And next thing you know, you have a generation of people that live in their parents' basements. You have people who are working themselves literally to death, dying on the subway. You have, people that are having sex with machines and shit like that instead of with each other. I mean, it's like there's a myriad of material circumstances and conditions that are driving these externalities, these personality types or qualities, etc., that are seen as unfavorable. And just saying, well, these people just need to grow up, etc. To a degree, yes, we are all individuals, right? I think to a degree you do have some amount of free will. You have the decision to handle your life in the set of things and circumstances that come your way within the scope of your own decision and action. To a degree, you're faced with different crossroads at points in your life where you have decisions to be made, and you have the ability to make qualitative decisions about that. So I do think that there's individual responsibility, but I don't think that it's all individual responsibility. And I think that, and before you really start saying it's just an individual responsibility, you should try to alleviate the things that are just like absolutely driving all these negative things that individuals do in the first place.
Totally. I mean, like, I think that it's not an ailing of the soul that has, because I'll push back like a little bit, but still ultimately I think being faithful to what you're saying here, because I think that there is something to when people talk about like, oh, this is like a symptom of party culture and hedonism, and like I agree with that. I do agree with that. I do think that they've kind of been made synonymous a little bit. And I think the reason for that isn't solely because we have like this spiritual malaise, right? I think it's because like things that have happened that break down the natural enforcements on the natural enforcers of basic human responsibility and behaviors. The biggest one obviously being, because we're basically talking about one of the online right's favorite topics, which is the sexual revolution. We're talking about one of the big Pandora's box things is birth control, right? Mm-hmm. And birth control kind of fucked marriage in the West, like in a big way, right? Because because if you can have a mistress that you don't get pregnant, then the natural force that's putting security in your marriage is now kind of broken, right? Now let's see here. I think that when people talk about like the hedonism of it and all of that stuff, I think that one cultural issue that has been kind of made synonymous with this that I do see as a bad set of values that comes out of this, and I think that it underpins the whole point of like abortion is healthcare, is a human right kind of thing, is and someone mentioned incels a second ago, this idea that like people have to have sex, that you like cannot be celibate ever, right? Mm-hmm. That's fucking bullshit, right? Yeah, and that doesn't need to be explained to any man. And one of the funny things about it is that, like we talked about in our Yerk episode, people tell on themselves and say out loud what they actually think when they're talking about incels, right? Because women just put on their like social Darwinist caps and just go fucking hard on sexually unsuccessful men. And this whole idea of like, you're not entitled to sex. Well, like, people aren't entitled to having sex, right? And in my mind, there are natural systems that enforce responsibility, right? And it's all over the place. And getting people pregnant is one of the most iconic ones of that, right? Examples of that. And I think it does just come down to like, it's kind of unthinkable these days to just like have the basic the basic approach of just being like, you simply should not have sex with someone that you're not willing to have a baby with. That actually might not be, to be honest, that might not be that crazy of a thing to say to men, because because that's what it comes down to, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't get the final say in that. Feelings on that may vary from person to person. Maybe women are less used to hearing it. But yeah, I mean, you shouldn't have sex with anyone you're not willing to have a fucking child with. I think that honestly, this is getting onto some Ted K shit, which is basically just like, I think that advancements in technology break down these natural systems. And I don't necessarily think that it is this like we're straying further from God's light and we're doing things that never were supposed to happen. I mean, there's one particular topic that I can think of where that is the case that we talk about quite a bit. But at the very least, it needs to be acknowledged that like the effect that like birth control, the wide availability of birth control has had on relations between men and women has been insane, like an insane disruption in the nicest way I can put it. That's what I think. And yeah, I think that when people talk about, to reiterate, when people talk about like party culture and all of that stuff, like I think that stuff is bad. And I know a lot of people that see that stuff as a moral virtue. And that's something I do encounter a lot. But the clearest thing to me is just that like it does give rise to these like weird senses of entitlement people have. And I think that's bad. Because there are consequences in life for things. There simply
definitely are. Yeah, I think that's kind of part of an eternal struggle with men, like man, not men, but man as a whole, is kind of a general war with our limiting factors, or with any type of checks and balances imposed on us by nature, or anything that's not just individual will. And I think that this is one of those instances. And I was, and also going back on what you were saying about this is in part a sentiment of party culture. I mean, I think for some individuals, sure, but I also think that party culture and that hedonism, the cultural debauchery, is in itself a symptom as well. And so, I mean, like, we're just addressing like symptoms 40 things down the goddamn pole, rather than actually addressing the root of the issue, which is, ultimately that's, one could have an argument to say that's all you ever can do, is just try to address the symptoms, but that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm more interested in trying to see in what way can we get to the root of it, right? And to me, this particularly doesn't do that. Now, understand though that I think I agree with all that, Slav. Like, I think that's one thing I was kind of arguing with my roommate about it recently, because I was like, listen, I mean, to a degree, it's just like, maybe just like, don't be fucking all the time. You know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, I was a teenager before. I have made reckless decisions. I have had sex with people that I wouldn't want children with. Now, hindsight, could I have looked back and maybe sat down and had a more meaningful thought process about that? Sure. But am I going to, as like a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old, doing... Of course not. Doing whatever? No. And are those the people who ultimately would be the most screwed if they had to have a kid? Also, yes. So it comes, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, ideally in a perfect world, right, there'd be a lot more impetus on, meaningful relations with individuals, on building family and building community, on supporting people in your community when they're in need. There would be, people wouldn't be killing their babies. There wouldn't be a need for it. People would be engaging in sexual relations with people who they did encounter or did envision a future with, or at the very least could make it work if there was a future there, if they had to with a kid. In a perfect world, maybe there wouldn't be abortions, but I mean, we don't live in the perfect world, and so I think that there's leeway that you got to give here between what is my vision of an ideal world and what are we working with now.
Preach, brother COH.
I mean, well, yeah, just speaking for myself, I think only having sex with people that you would impregnate seems like a high bar for me. I'm just speaking for myself. That
Generally
seems like
historical too.
A pretty high bar, yeah. And you know, and just in general, like, people fuck. That's just what people do. People are animals and they fuck. I mean, the animals fuck. That's just also, we're talking about our hardwiring to procreate. It's not really about your hardwiring to procreate isn't really super discerning. I mean, yes, it's discerning to the degree of, like, you know, the symmetry of a woman's face will indicate that, or averageness and symmetry will indicate that she's less likely to have genetic defects, which makes her seem more attractive to you, right? That's the calculus your brain is pulling off on you to make it seem like she's attractive or whatever. And that's weird discerning whether she's a fitting mate or whatever. But I mean, that's not really much. You know what I mean? Averageness, basically. You know, the stereotype that men will fuck anything. I mean, there's some truth to that. You know, we're wired to procreate, to impregnate as many people as possible. It's really a survival thing. It's not really this idea of, like, discerning that it's the one person that I would, like, have a life with and raise a kid with. That's, ironically, it sounds trad, but it's honestly kind of a modern thing. It's well, that's what's funny is a lot of religion is kind of a modern thing in terms of, like, reining in our natural impulses and giving structure and order. But that's what's kind of ironic about it is that it's an invented thing. It is a modernity in a way.
It's imposed.
A lot of those practices.
It's like a It's like a proto legal system.
Exactly. And I would just say, you know, if I'm just speaking to people listening or whatever, you know, I mean, a lot of life is just, you know, fucking random people. I mean, not random, but, like, I wouldn't put that much pressure on yourself in terms of who you fuck. I mean, like, some of life is just, you know, you're just going to have random flings, and there's a lot of value in that. That's not just about who you have a kid with, you know. That's been my experience, at least. But but yeah, I mean, in the past, if we're talking about the past, you know, people just fuck anybody, and everybody's an accident, and there's no birth control. You have a lot of kids popping up that are accidents. And, you know, you have a lot of people who are just like, oh, shit, I got someone pregnant. Oh, fuck, I got to take care of it now. This isn't the woman of my dreams. This isn't who I plan to have a kid with, but I'm kind of obligated now.
Yeah.
There's that. Or there's the situation of, fuck this, I'm getting the fuck out of here and dip. And do the same thing with another woman, right? That's sort of been the
classic move.
Yeah.
Those are the classic moves of our forefathers, right? That's what's been going on pre-birth control. That's the natural, you know, order of things. And the thing is, while that's the natural course that was going on, it was way more affordable to have a kid. Again, I have to keep harping on this because it's, like, objectively true in every metric. It was way more affordable to have a kid. You could be on minimum wage and afford a fucking house, and, like, you could live a decent life doing basic work, and take care of a kid,
or
take
even
care of a wife who can't work.
I mean, you lived with a community where, you know, you have a wide extended family that, you know, would pitch in and take care of your child. You know, you raise it as a unit more so. Yes,
and that point SLAV made about the inceldom, right? That's also very modern because, I mean, obviously women have more options in the sexual marketplace, obviously. But at the same time, you know, we're at a time where people are having less sex than our previous generations. Sure. That's documented. Big reason for that is the increased alienation. Everybody's separated. COVID, I'm sure, is factoring into that. Even before that, people, again, I keep saying it, more people were living alone. People are just isolated from each other. And you know, that just gets worse over time. And, you know, I think, the natural process was like, you have a kid by accident. It's not the end of the world. You could afford it. Now everybody's isolated. You get to be more selective about having a kid with birth control, and you can't even afford it anyways. So I think a lot of the trad stuff is sort of like applying. Again, I just disagree with them about what's causing the issues and what the solution is. I think they believe that if you change the culture, you'll change the economy, or I don't even know if they care about the economy, but if you change the culture, everything else will fall into place. I just don't believe that. And I think, you know, we want to talk about that. I think the trads agree with me about is incentives. What is incentivized, right? And this is just simple economics. When things are needed, when they're in need, it's an inelastic demand. You can charge whatever the fuck you want, and people have to pay it because it's a need. Having a kid, raising a family, is a need to a lot of people. That's what most people do. They have kids, they have families. That's been all of human history. And taking care of the kid is the need. It is the most important thing of all your expenses, basically. I mean, you could be a deadbeat dad, but I'm just saying, like, that's the natural, situation that you get put in, and the way you evaluate things, and your priorities. Now, cheap wants and pleasures. I think there's this comparison of like, oh, you don't want to have a kid because you'd rather spend your money on Funko Pops, like some loser or whatever. I think this is sort of misleading because the Funko Pops are cheap and having the kid is expensive.
Yeah.
So, and this is where they might agree with me, is that our incentives have been fucked up. They make the cheap desires, the pleasures, very cheap and accessible. So you are naturally being incentivized to go after these cheap pleasures because it's more accessible. It's within reach. Now, the incentive to have a family or to get education or healthcare or any of these other things that are housing, things that are more necessities, they've been price gouged the fuck out of. So you can't go after those things. They're out of reach. So you reach for the thing that's within reach, which is the cheap drugs and the porn and the other things. So I think the trads think of it as like a 1-to-1 exchange. Like, oh, you picked up one in place of the other. No, I mean, there's an economic thing that incentivizes one and disincentivizes the other. And I think they'd agree with me in the fact that, like, that should be changed. I think that should be changed. I'm sure they think that should be changed. But you have to deal with the right fulcrum first. You can't just supplant a trad mentality onto society.
Yes.
And expect everything to be fixed. It's like, all right, everybody go have kids and live how we lived like centuries ago. And they would just look at you like, what the fuck are you even talking about? You know what I mean? So it's just like, that's what I think of it. I think of it, look, we can solve everybody's problems. You know what I mean? We can make everybody happy, but we have to talk about what's causing it. What's causing it? You know what I mean? What's causing it is the fact that they're smart and they know that to make these cheap, addictive pleasures, turn your wants into needs. Now you need that Funko Pop, or you need that porn, or you need that drug. Like they switch that around because there's more profit margin in that. Yeah. And, we just have to be aware of this and figure out what do we want to prioritize. And then they say, the things you do need, we're going to charge more and more every year. Every single year it goes up. For what? Why? What value is increased? Nothing. Made up, completely made up. And then people say, logically, why would I go after this thing that I can't even attain, that I have to take 3 jobs for? I can't even attain. I can have one job and get this cheap thing, get endless pleasure from that. So people have to, we're animals, we're hamsters, we're mice in the maze. So we're going where the maze is designed. This isn't, I don't view, again, this is what Siwa just saying. I really don't view this as like an individual thing of like people are making the immoral choice or the conducting their lives immorally. And that's why we're in the pit we're in. And if we just fix that, everything's going to be hunky dory. And it's like, bro, I don't know. I just, it seems too ridiculous to me on its face, but that's what I sort of think.
We live in a culture that literally incentivizes immorality. Like the profit incentive in itself is immoral. Like the way that people go out and make money, the way that like our entire economic reality is set up is immoral. And so, I mean, in itself, it breeds immorality. It breeds hedonistic living. It breeds anything like that. It breeds like this whole kind of anti-life kind of mentality that people have. And not even anti-life, just nihilistic. And just kind of going around without purpose and meaning kind of feeling. I mean, like you're saying, these are replacements, right? Because they're more easily accessible. They require less maintenance, right? They require less attention. They require less financial capital. They require less time. And hookup culture, which is, what a lot of these people are worried about with this whole situation and view it as breeding this, is another one of those, right? People being more atomized, people having less of an income, having, less stable personal lives themselves and less communities. It's more difficult to get out and have a meaningful long-term relationship or be able to financially support building a family together with someone. And so what you do, you open the app, you swipe right until you find someone who's, you're talking about symmetry, facial symmetry, or whatever dings in your brain. And then you're like, boom.
Can I get a green line on that shit?
Yeah, you start getting green lines, popping up in your brain on everything you're seeing. And, that's kind of that's a trade-off. And I mean, I think that it's like, for me, it's order of operations. I don't love abortion. I'd really like to see way less of it. I mean, no doubt about that. Sure. I think my solution on how we get there is different. And I think like you're saying, dude, there's an economic frame to this. You look at pregnancy. How much does an average pregnancy cost? A fuckload. If you have any issues during pregnancy and you need to have a C-section or whatever, that fuckload is turned into like a mega fuckload. Like a C-section is like $30,000 or more.
Yes.
So I mean, that's difficult. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, we don't have any health care. We don't have access to it. We live to where essentially, if I broke my leg and wasn't able to go to work anymore, unless I was able to get hooked up with Aflac or some shit, basically I'm fucked. Like I'd have to pay medical bills for that. I wouldn't be able to go to work anymore, etc. Well, the same thing goes with like if you get pregnant and you can't be at work, you don't have maternity leave. Or you can't find a job because you're pregnant and they don't want you to leave in X amount of months or whatever if you're not employed already. Or you just don't have any money and, you end up having to go in and you find out that, oh, your baby's breached. So you're going to need to have a C-section. Well, that's 30 to 50 grand right there. Not to mention, if it's coming out a little early, if it's going to need to be staying in like a NICU or something like that. I mean, the price goes up by a day. And then you're essentially setting yourself up and your child, whose life you're now bringing into this world, for, a very difficult economic reality moving forward. So, I mean, it's understandable why people make the decision. Do I think that at the end of the day, it's generally an ugly thing in reality? Yes, I do think that. But do I think it's maybe an uglier thing in reality at scale to just be pumping all these kids out that don't, have
there's a lot of
or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of right wingers who make the argument to me when I bring up the economic thing. They're like, well, in poor countries they just have a shit ton of kids. I'm like, yeah, those are poor countries. I mean, not to be like crude or whatever, but like, do you want to live like? Do you think that's an apt comparison, like a third world African country, like to what? Again, like,
I mean, dude, it's a survival
thing.
These are the same people who are going to get mad at people who live on welfare. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, you just keep having kids, just getting welfare checks, blah, blah, blah. It's the same people, dude. It's well, what do you think those poor people do when they have all those kids, motherfucker? Like, Jesus
Again,
Christ.
It's a survival thing because you need to have as many kids as possible because odds are some of them are going to die, go to jail, lives get fucked up. You need to raise the odds that one of them will be successful and take care of the family. That's just across humanity, across history. So that's a survival thing. But, it's very hard to raise that many kids, and most people, if they could choose not to, when like had to weigh it out economically, I mean, they choose not to because it's a huge burden. I mean, think about it. You have to have two incomes now to raise a family, and then you need to have daycare because there's nobody there to take care of the kid. So that cost, the daycare cost, is insane. On top of that, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of things that just pile on that make it it disincentivizes it. And, again, like that hedonistic culture, to me, again, culture is downstream from economics. The culture reflects where we are and our values. I don't think that the culture shapes the country, you know what I mean? Or shapes I don't think it comes out of nowhere. I don't think like some random, pop stars come out of nowhere and they're just like, hey, it's cool to just do hookups. And then all of a sudden the whole country changes overnight. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's how it works. It's like our country was already getting like this, alienated and very hedonistic, but then the core necessities are expensive. And then you see it reflected in the music and the culture and the pop culture and the movies and everything. I think that's how it works. But again, I feel like the trad should agree with me about this because what do they have a beef with? We should make it more financially tenable to have a kid and to have proper healthcare and proper education and proper housing for your kid, and food should be affordable. Like, what's there to disagree with me about? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. To me, it's like if we can establish, if some way we're able to establish that people have more affordable housing baked into the system, people have access to healthcare. There is maybe universal child care. There's maternity leave across the board as well as paternity leave. Or you're just financially able enough to support a family on with a single income. If a lot of things are changed and put into place, I'd be fine with then just being like, all right, we can have a serious discussion now about restricting abortion significantly. I would be fine with that. But
if you have a stable country with stable economics, there's going to be less abortions.
Yeah, exactly.
There's going to be less crime. All these things are bad indicators. If you have high abortions and high crime, that means those are indicators that your country's something's gone wrong. Something's fucked up. Something's not dialed in right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that if you have all these things set in, it will go down. It has to go down because there won't be people being like, oh, I can't afford this kid. I can't. You know what I mean? That's not going to be, there's going to be less instances of that by nature, right? I mean,
I think that's the case for sure. And I think, there's always going to be externalities that come up in life that, lead to individuals having difficult lives, even if it's not economic. But at the very least, we could try to provide a material and economic reality that makes it more tenable to live a better life.
Yeah. And I think this right-wing argument of like, oh, just have as many kids, and these poor countries that have a fuck ton of kids. Like, one thing that's missing with that is like, all right, quantity of life versus quality of life. Like, what about quality of life?
Yeah.
Like, do you just want people to have 1,000 kids and we all live in fucking super favelas? Is that cool with you? Just because we got the number up of the kids, you know what I mean? Like, you got to be clear about what your ideals are. Yeah, but see what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. It's like they have these ideals of like, but it's like, yo, but do you want quality? Like, I want quality. Like, I want those kids to have quality lives. That's better for all of us, right? Like, I'm not super concerned about getting the number up for the number's sake. Like, you want the number to be healthy for sustainable society, and those kids to be fucking solid and not be, you don't need to have 12 kids and 8 of them die. That's why that third world comparison is so strange to me. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, I think to be fair, this isn't saying that I disagree with you, but I think part of it also that maybe you're kind of talking past is that maybe kind of unbeknownst to these people, but I think like this is also kind of just like a reaction. I think that these are people kind of reacting to plummeting birth rates in industrialized developed countries. I think that that's what that is. And depending on regardless of whatever an individual person's opinion is or thoughts are on like white populations in industrialized developed countries, there is something going on there numbers wise. And I think that it makes sense to react the way that they do, to just be like, I'm just going to have a ton of kids, but yeah, I mean, I think you're on the money. I think that that's a thing that should be acknowledged about it. You know what I mean? It's like, the United States is like sexually impotent. You know what I mean? Like we need to import people from third world countries to just break even, you know what I mean? And I think that that's got to have some effect on the national psyche a little bit. And so, yeah, when I hear people being all cum-brained and just being like, I want to have, you want to have the 12 kids in the favela with your flower dress trad wife, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it's not real. I mean, it's internet brain a little bit.
I think it also goes towards a drive of like, because there is such a baked in level of isolation or atomization and communities breaking down, there feels a need to build your own community. And for a lot of people that can come out as, I'm just going to birth my own community. That kind of idea.
Well, I think that's, I think that there's actually something to that, though. To be honest,
I think that that's invalid. I'm just saying, I think that's a drive that's in place there.
Totally, because I do think that, I think that a collectivist consciousness is really important for people, especially in the kind of culture of narcissism that we exist in. And being in a monogamous relationship is like the beginning unit of a more collective consciousness. And starting a family is this kind of, it's kind of like, maybe laugh at me a little bit, but I think it's kind of like a way of redeeming your soul from the kind of like narcissism that our culture wants you to go towards. Just the idea of, if I woke up tomorrow and I had a couple children, like that's comfort. It is a comfort to me that like I could be at a place at some point in the future in my life where like I'm living for more than just myself. Because to be honest, I've never really been good at prioritizing taking care of myself. You know what I mean? I want to take better care of others than I take care of myself. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to that, And
exactly.
I do think that I think that this comes down to kind of the eternal critique of the right generally, which is that like I think that if we're judging it just on face value and everything, I think that the right has much better cultural values than the left does, because the left is essentially just like a delivery mechanism for like bourgeois decadence and hedonism. But you know, at the end of the day, it's basically just self-improvement, self-help shit. And it's not really like a plan for change on a societal level. But you know, not letting that get in the way of like a good thing. Like, you know, I go into work and I see people that live very hedonistic lifestyles, and they have no value in investing in something more meaningful. And like, it is very obvious to me, you know, in my very like, you know, elitist feeling superior way that I have, right, thinking to myself, like, these people would be better off if they did just like have a fucking family or pursue something more meaningful, you know what I mean? But they do the Funko Pop shit, you know? And honestly, like we were talking about earlier when we're talking about like, you know, the distinction between second and third trimester, you know, there's going to be outliers, but you have to make a hard rule for everybody. And there's going to be people lost in the cracks. Like, it's kind of how I view, in a kind of materialistic way, how I view religion a little bit, right? Is like, it's a social software that you load up into, you know, large populations of people. And, you know, for the most part, it's going to work for people more than it doesn't work for people. And like setting people up to basically just be like, meet somebody, fuck, have children. I mean, it's going to work for people more than it's not going to work for people. At this point, I don't actually think that I'm like arguing or denying anything that was actually said by other of you guys, but now I'm just kind of free flowing. But yeah.
I think that it gives people more to live for. Obviously, like if you have a kid, it's like it changes, like, you know, a very individualistic mindset to one of at least extending it towards one other person, you know, maybe two, if it's your wife or, you know, your baby mama or whatever who has your child as well. It kind of takes you outside of yourself a little bit.
Which is like also, really important. Like escaping the self is like the ultimate adventure of the modern world. Like it's
absolutely,
it needs to be done. And I do think that like the like corruption that will befall the hero in that journey if they like don't. I fucking sound like fucking retarded Jordan Peterson right now.
I was literally about to say that. Yeah.
I know, like, okay, bucko, but like that face when SLAV made his bed this morning. But like, but like the corruption that befalls the hero in that adventure. I mean, I think that it does look something like, you know, these modern gender identities or things like that, where I mean, you can't you can't just say like my internal state dictates that I am this on the outside, you know? I mean, I mean, to be honest, I see that as an extension of the same thing as we were talking about earlier, of just being like, I'm able to just go out and fuck because that's what I deserve, and I should be able to do that. And any external consequences of that make it real, I'm interfacing with the world. I should be entitled to not have to deal with that. You know what I mean? Like, no, there is a static reality outside of your ego. You know what I mean? I you know, fucking fuck Descartes. You know what I mean? Like, like this is bullshit, dude. And, and you gotta escape the self. And,
I think that's very important. I'm really glad that you actually brought that up, because I feel like that's really like the whole crux of a lot of my issues with like identity. And this is that, I mean, really, it's like trying to, I don't know. I mean, there's obviously a very like a societal drive and an incentive to keep people trapped at the level of self. And I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls in our society today. I think that's why we have such spiritual deadness. Yeah. And I think it's inherently anti-spiritual. And generally anti-life. But anyways, I think that it gives you that chance to escape the self by doing that. I think you can have that meaningful experience without having to have a family, though.
Sure.
Absolutely. And I think that also I don't think that that's like a solution for, I mean, obviously you're not saying that it is, but I don't think it's a solution for everyone. Like, I don't think that poor, like say there's some guy atomized, bad economic conditions. He's sitting around trying to decide if he's a they or a them or a he or a she or whatever. And then one day it's just like, oh, I'm going to have a kid actually in a family. That should fix this. I think that's a dangerous mode of thinking. I think we see it time and time again. People try to have a kid to fix a relationship or whatever. And I think that ultimately turns out pretty negatively. I think that raising children in unfavorable economic conditions can be a catalyst for, a lot of good or a lot of bad. And I think that if you look at issues with drug abuse, domestic violence, incest, that kind of thing, stuff like that, very, very ugly externalities of human nature. I think that they are more prevalent in more turbulent economic conditions because there's a higher ability to leverage power in those situations. And I think that just, being like, well, all these people that have no direction, if they just had a family or a kid, that would be, better. I think there's definitely something to it, but I think that ultimately you're going to be raising a generation of fucked up kids probably a lot. Cause everyone's fucked up to a degree, right? You can't raise a kid perfectly no matter what you do. But I think that there will be, children born into economic situations and familial situations and trees that maybe shouldn't be in there. And I don't think that it's necessarily there's an option or an ability to grow strong in such a scenario. There's also the ability to give in to one's weakness, one's fallen state in those types of scenarios. And I think that unfortunately, because it's easier, more convenient oftentimes, and like you're saying, we have less checks and balances. We have less strong communities who are really kind of there to keep that in check and keep an eye on that. People devolve into those more often than not.
Yeah. I think the benefits to having a kid are pretty obvious. I think, one, I think we're hardwired to do it. So you're fulfilling that. It's the reason why sex feels good. And aside from that, it gives you something to be responsible for, which takes you out of your own head. These people who are obsessed with their gender identity and all that, they're navel gazing, they're deep in their own head, and they're fucked up. And this is one way to get out of that. If we're strictly just talking like personal level lifestyle, like how to things like that. But even with the trans the pedo teachers debacle and all this stuff, our kids are, we should homeschool our kids and all that's going on. It's a lot of conversation on the right. Yeah, again, I don't know. The main thing I just wonder with all this stuff is how do you even have the kid in the first place? That's the main question I have in my head. I make decent money and I don't want to have kids, but if I were to, and I've thought about it logistically or whatever, it is like a heavy undertaking and financially to the point of being is this even feasible or whatever? It wasn't always like that. So again, I just think that's the thing. I think people are having them later, and I don't think that's all because everybody's selfish. I really don't believe that, and I don't believe that. It's just objective. We just went through COVID and they just shut down the economy. They just destroyed everybody's lives. The housing market is fucked up. It's impossible to buy a house now. All these things go into how can you even have a kid to begin with? How do you even do that? And then people tell me, well, they do it. Poor people do it all the time. And their lives are fucking miserable. Again, it's and their kids, might end up dead or fucking in jail or whatever. That's, that's not a solution to me. That's not a solution of just it's more than just numbers. It's more than just looking at the fertility rate and just seeing a number. It's got to be quality of life. Not just quantity. It's got to be But I think, we talked about the philosophical thing. We talked about the value for one's own psyche in life. And I don't know if we got into the state states' right issue enough. Do you guys want to?
No, I don't think we did.
Well, I mean, at this point, I like, fuck, we're 2 hours, 12 minutes.
We could reconvene.
Can we lighten it, or we could lightning round it and then maybe reconvene later? I mean, I could just.
Yeah, I feel like with the
I don't have
states'
many
rights
opinions
thing,
on it, so you guys could take it.
I mean,
I feel like I've got a decent bit to unpack there.
I mean, it's the main meat of the topic. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I say we talk about it. I say we do it more service by talking about it later, but I say we just one or one and a half of us lightning rounds it real fast.
Oh, well, there's a couple things I wanted to also just drop in.
Yes.
Because we just spent 2 hours talking about abortion, and everyone spent the past week now, or 3 days, whatever, maybe only been 2 days, talking about abortion. But also in those 2 days, what's occurred is that the Federal Reserve has decided to hike interest rates. Mm-hmm. So interest rates have gone up 0.5 point, which is having significant economic consequences as far as with stocks, with crypto, with speculation, with investment, and will also impact inflation in day-to-day life as well. And that's something that's just, that's not been mentioned anywhere. You're not really hearing or seeing much about that. And also we confirmed that we gave intelligence to Ukraine that they then used to bomb and sink a Russian warship. So we are kind of owning up and committing acts of war against Russia that happened today, that they did that. So yeah, those are kind of two big things that are going on that are really being swept. And also the Pfizer trial data was released yesterday.
Really?
Yes. Which showed that they in fact knew that it was not as effective as they claimed that it was. The trials led to a number of deaths. And typically, if there is one death within a trial in 30 days, the FDA shuts it down. They allowed it to continue. And there were a number of side effects and consequences and result of the vaccine that were not published and not discussed and swept under the rug through this. So there's been a good bit of stuff that's all happened here in the past day and a half or two that's really just kind of being papered over with the abortion thing, which I understand it's a significant topic, and it's also been a hot button topic over the past several decades.
Yeah, I mean it's a legitimate thing. But yeah, well, and I mean obviously, I think it's probably pretty safe to. I'm going to speak for. I assume all three of us can see that this leak almost certainly happened to be able to make it so that the Dems could flip the script for midterms. I mean, it seems really, really obvious. Yes. I don't know that a leak like this has ever happened. As far as the lawfare aspects of this go, I think that I think that Roe v. Wade didn't actually legalize abortion. It just constitutionally protects it, right? And so that going away, it's going to basically now be up to states on whether or not they want to actually make abortion illegal. And what this is going to do is this is just going to, open a huge emphasis on state legislatures. I'm not a states' rights guy, really. And ultimately, honestly, I have a little bit of tanky in me. I like the idea of a centralized state that has the ability to actually do things, right? I'm probably the most China sympathetic here. Maybe I slow down.
We're about to call Logo up.
Yeah. Oh man,
Get him back on the
heard
pod.
That. I hope he heard you say that.
Dude, we get into China and Xi Jinping in my latest bonus. So check that out, patrons.
Oh, nice.
The person I talked to lived a couple years in China, actually. And they told me, I had no idea, that there is a place in China by the name of Chongqing, which I refused to believe because that's just Ching Chong backwards. But anyways, if there's one thing that the last couple of years has taught me, with the fact that COVID and getting laid off and all of that kind of fucked with my savings and fucked my life up in a lot of different ways, and just having the state and its little white blood cells of people I used to call peers around me try to fucking fuck me in the ass and destroy me. If that's taught me one thing, it's that I am really strongly not in favor of the United States government centralizing. There is nothing good to come of that. And so entering into a new era where state government is going to be further emphasized, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think that the federal government is pretty fucking cash poor right now, which also is making me one of the reasons I'm pulling my hair out over the fact that we're just like giving this fucking faggot Zelensky all this fucking money. But anyways, I digress. I think it's awesome. And regardless, like I am ultimately, as just a terrible Christian, at the end of the day, kind of indifferent to the murdering of children in the abortion issue. But I think I see this as nothing but an absolute win for us as far as decentralization, because that is simply, it needs to be acknowledged, that is the only way forward in the United States. And let's fucking go, boys. We're back. Let's go.
I was thinking, I think that functionally what's going to happen is that I don't think there's going to be any success, like seceding necessarily. I don't think there's going to be anything like that.
Of course
not.
But
I think that what we're going to see is a lot of situations kind of like the sanctuary cities with immigration, where it's like, oh, we're a sanctuary city now. And then the federal government's like, oh, well, we're not going to give you any meaningful financial support or, give you really the privileges of being in the federation, other than just the fact that you are. And I think that's really what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a functional kind of balkanization in a way of just like, Florida is just going to be like, doing their own thing largely, and Texas is going to be doing their own kind of thing, and then like California is going to be kind of doing their own thing. But I think largely we still stay together. I think that the federal government probably loses a little bit of its like. I think over the past 10 or so years or more, it has already, with like marijuana legalizations popping up here and there in different states, and not being and now other drug stuff and the immigration, et cetera. So I think we're going to see that. I think that would be good. I think, man, I don't know. I've really kind of been thinking a lot about, I've been trying to think about what do I think would be ideal, like an ideal society. I think we need to scale down some to a degree. So I do think that, like, I don't mean downscale like in a Malthusian way, like we just need less people, but I think that like governments and legislatures and municipalities should be handled largely at more localized levels, I think. And I think that this kind of is a step in that direction in some way. I think that a emphasis on state or local government that then adheres to a broader federation loosely, I think is a better system than like, a top-down federation just making, centralized rules for a country that is as culturally different and also just geographically different and vast as the United States is. I just don't see that working very well under really any type of circumstance.
It's interesting you say that, and I don't want to spiral off into something broader and different, but a friend of mine who's he's had like right-wing leanings, like kind of Keith Woods-ish leanings, and super smart of like knowing history and like just obscure different cultures. It's like that Chad meme, like how can I be racist more accurately? Like, studying intensely the different cultures of everybody. And he just explains things to me like, India, we think of India as full of Indians, or China full of Chinese people, or, parts of Africa. And you dig into the weeds, and they are culturally like different species.
I mean, yeah, of course.
But they're all Indian or whatever. But when you look at it that way, he was saying that America is actually very homogenous culturally. We think we're culturally diverse, but we're actually homogenous culturally. We're racially diverse, which was an interesting distinction he told me that I hadn't occurred to me. But like culturally, we're fairly homogenous and racially diverse, but everywhere else is more racially homogenous, culturally diverse, which is something, this is interesting. I don't really have much thoughts about that. As far as the states' rights thing, and I don't have too much to say about that. I'd imagine if it's illegal to have an abortion in Kentucky, people will go from Kentucky to some blue state to get the abortion, right? I mean,
if they have the means.
Poor people can't do that, and poor people can't up and move and unroot their lives, nor should they have to in order to, be in a place that.
Would it take moving though? Wouldn't it just be like a car ride? like across the.
I mean, a lot of
state
people,
lines. Not to bring that back. Crossing state lines.
Hey man, how much did it cost to fill my fucking gas tank this last week? I mean, it is, you know.
I mean, that versus the cost of having a kid.
I guess that's already
weigh that out as like.
Well, or I mean, I think
it.
the real comparison would be the cost of just having some people come over with a bottle of liquor and having them kick you in the abdomen.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god,
that kind of shit. I mean, yes.
I was wondering too, like what's the reality of illegal abortions? I know you're joking there, but like,
I'm not joking.
I'm not joking at all. Doing it more and more.
Yeah.
I mean, see, that's a concern, right? Because like if we just ban abortion and we don't deal with why people want abortions, you're just going to have a lot of illegal abortions too. I mean, that's the nature with a lot of things.
Right? With
drugs, yeah, you're just going to have illegal, you know, until you nip in the bud why, you know, whether it's spiritual or whatever, like the reason why people are going to these things, they're going to get them one way or another. It's just something that this is the first thing I think of when I think of like, all right, it's illegal here, but it's legal 20-minute drive away. Again, have some shady doctor do it, maybe die during the illegal pregnancy. Yeah, I don't know.
Abortions already, I mean, they're somewhat costly already anyways, to where, I mean, like, you either...
What is the cost?
It's like
Jamie, bring that shit up.
dollars. But I imagine it probably varies depending on location and general kind of funding for... I don't know how any of that shit works. Like, I'm not in the weeds on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just telling you, man, like making it out of reach of low class people is not the feat that we think it is.
Yeah, exactly,
I know that a lot of the time, like, it's funny to like laugh at leftists because they'll contort themselves into fucking pretzels to explain how like poor people like can't help but only eat Domino's 7 days a week for every meal. Like they'll say ridiculous shit that is easy to dismiss a lot of the time, but in this case, like, nah, man. I mean, like, valid. Yeah, I can't go and yeah, no. I was just going to say, I can't go and get an abortion at the 7-Eleven, but I mean, I can't go and get an abortion anywhere because I don't have, you know, I'm a fucking man. But
yeah, so you shouldn't be making rules about women's bodies, bro.
Hey, man, I'll have you know, I watched a few episodes of Handmaid's Tale. So actually,
I've done the research.
I'll just, for the record, I've never watched that dog shit show. I don't want to.
I've seen it either, actually.
Yeah, I don't know.
I saw the first season of it.
My GF tells me that Margaret Atwood is a fucking abysmal author, and that's all.
Dude,
that's
Margaret,
all I know.
I don't know anything about that broad, but I know the main woman, and it's a Scientologist.
That's right.
What? Yeah, what's her name?
That broad from you know, Mad Men. She was in that remake of The Invisible Man, but it was about like a toxic
abusive shit.
A toxic gaslighting boyfriend as the Invisible Man. If the Invisible Man was a Fed Post listener. But here I feel like we should wrap it up now.
Yeah, we should wrap it up. It's getting kind of late, but we can talk sometime again. If you guys are free, we can shit. I mean, if y'all are free Saturday, we can do another bonus or something. On states' rights.
All right, that was part 1 of our episode. If you'd like to listen to part 2, you can find that at patreon.com/fedpost. Thanks for listening.